everyone, and welcome back to Homeschool and Chill, the YouTube channel that seeks to alleviate your stress and anxiety about homeschooling. My name is Katherine, and today I want to talk to you about Afrocentric homeschooling. So, the reason why I wanted to make this video is because among a lot of Black parents who are homeschooling, I've been hearing a lot about, how can I make my children's homeschool experience more Afrocentric? How can I get more Black history into my children's lessons and things like that? So I wanted to make this video to kind of help you guys out. So just to start off with, I'm going to kind of give you an outline of what all I'm going to go over in this video. First of all, I'm going to tell you what Afrocentric homeschooling is in case you're not familiar with it. I'm going to tell you who would benefit from Afrocentric homeschooling, and then I'm going to give you some very basic tips to get you started on your journey if you are interested in Afrocentric homeschooling. So first of all, what is Afrocentric homeschooling? If you really pay attention to the name, you kind of have the answer right there for you. But Afrocentric homeschooling is basically where your child's education is centered around an African or Black perspective. And the reason why I guess Afrocentric homeschooling is so important to a lot of Black families is if you look at a lot of traditional schools, it's basically a Eurocentric perspective that your children are getting from education. And just an example of that would be if you look at American history, in pretty much any school that you go to, in most schools, is told from a European perspective. We're following a European's story all the way throughout history, from their origins all the way to their struggle for religious freedom, from their pilgrimage to the New World and colonizing the New World, and their manifest destiny, and all of these sort of things, all the way up to now, where Europeans are the main character and everyone else are just supporting characters to tell the main story of Europeans throughout history. An Afrocentric perspective would be pretty much the same thing, where instead of the European being the protagonist in the story of history throughout time, instead it is an African perspective of how Americans got from Africa, what was going on in Africa, all the way up to where Black people find themselves now. If you are Black, you find yourself to be a Black person, then it's important because you are sharing your culture, you're sharing your history, your struggle of your ancestors with your children. You're getting to get more of that. And I mean, anybody can sit here and you can think back to your experience in school, unless you just went to a very unique school. But for the most part, your experience with history and American history has just been from a European perspective. And what you saw of your own people was basically slavery, Harriet, Tubman, Martin Luther King, George Washington Carver, peanuts. Like, that's the most that you got out of Black history. And maybe in February, you might have had like one neat teacher who like sprinkled a little more Black razzle dazzle on your educational experience. But for the most part, the only time you really saw yourself in history was mainly during slavery and the Civil Rights Movement. Secondly is an Afrocentric homeschooling experience is important if your children are Black. And for some of you who may be watching this, it may be like, you just said if you're Black, so like, it's common sense the kids are Black. But that's not the case. It is 2020. And it doesn't necessarily mean that if, children are Black, then their parents are Black. There are a lot of people who have adopted children, who are fostering children, or find themselves in some sort of way the parent or guardian of Black children, and they are not Black themselves. So an Afrocentric homeschooling experience would be really good so that your child, even though you may be white or Latino or whatever you might find yourself being, if your child turns out to be Black, or you have a blended family, you have Black children in your household that you are homeschooling, then an Afrocentric perspective is important so that your child can learn about their culture, their ancestors, their people's history, and be able to see themselves reflected in their learning experience. Or maybe you are neither one. Maybe you are neither Black yourself, and your children are not Black, but you are just seeking a way to diversify your children's homeschooling experience, where you understand, okay, I need to expose my children to more than just one perspective, and I want them to really be able to understand other people around them as well, or I want them to have a deeper understanding of history, where they're not just hearing a story told from one perspective, but they really understand what all different people were going through at different points of history. Then an Afrocentric homeschooling experience may be perfect for you. You may not want to do I mean, if you're teaching your children about their own culture or where they come from, that might stand in the forefront, but especially history. If you're not necessarily doing all the different tips that I give later on in this video, then you definitely want your history to reflect everything that everyone has gone through throughout history. And the reason why I say that is because I had a magnificent English teacher in high school who always stressed the importance of, the perspective that a story is told. Whenever we were learning about something in literature, she said it's really important to pay attention to who the protagonist is and whose perspective that the story is being told from. Because typically, when you are reading a story, whoever is the protagonist, whoever's perspective we are receiving the story from, that is the person that we tend to identify with. That is the person that we are rooting for, who we are cheering for. We want to see their hopes and dreams and plans come to fruition and all those sort of things. The problem with that is when you are critiquing a literary work or you are analyzing a literary work, you notice that sometimes your protagonist may not always be the good guy. And that's not just for, books and literature, but that even goes for movies. I know that there's been movies that I have watched where the protagonist isn't such a good guy, but I'm rooting for them because we get to see their story. We get to see what they feel, what they're going through, what their hopes and dreams are, and we end up cheering for the bad guy sometimes. One example of that is, I don't know if any of you are familiar with American Gangster, which Denzel Washington, he was the lead role in that movie. So already it's like the lead character is being played by Denzel Washington. I'm on this character's side. But anyway, in this movie, Denzel Washington, he is a gangster. But we get to see his whole life story where, he started from the bottom and then we get to see him rise up to wealth, which who doesn't love a rags to riches story? We get to see that his mentor in the gangster life was killed. So you see him mourning from the very beginning. And then you see him try to take over and fulfill the role of his mentor before him. We see that he's not a ladies' man, but he is loyal and faithful to one woman. He falls in love with a beauty queen, Miss Puerto Rico, and he, right off knows that he wants to marry her and he's loyal to her. You never see any other women around. So of course, he seems like he's a loyal, faithful dude. When you look at all of those different things, him passing out turkeys in the hood, making sure that poor people can eat and all this kind of stuff, he looks like he's an awesome guy. He's smooth, he dresses well, he's humble, he loves one woman, all this sort of thing. It makes him seem like he's a great guy. And you kind of forget that he's responsible for the addiction and deaths of numerous people. So that's why, looking at history from multiple perspectives is important too, because oftentimes, history is told from only one perspective, and some people who are hailed as heroes, we don't really get to look at them critically and see that some of their heroic deeds were done by very villainous means. So now that I've explained to you what Afrocentric homeschooling is and who Afrocentric homeschooling would actually benefit, now I'm going to give you some simple tips of how you can get started on an Afrocentric homeschooling experience. Now, I do want to let you know that I am fairly new to this whole idea. I went to private school, so I was kind of like the one black girl in all of my classes, so I know what it's like to just pretty much be immersed in a Eurocentric environment. And so I wanted something new for my girls. Homeschooling them, I wanted them to really learn about where they came from, who they are, but really be able to see themselves in the world and not just be feeling like they're just on the sidelines, just a marginalized person, even though, Black people, we are a marginalized group. At first, I was a little bit intimidated, to be honest, because like I said, I had learned very little about Black history myself. And I think a lot of parents who are Black find themselves in that situation, that they can pretty much tell you a whole lot about just European American history in general. I can tell you very little about their own Black history, that, most of us were left on our own to do research on our own outside of school because so very little was taught us about our history growing up, even though we're Americans and Black history is American history. It shouldn't have to be separated. But anyway, some really simple ways to get started, because I was really intimidated. I asked people how do you make your homeschooling experience more Afrocentric if you didn't grow up with that and you don't know very much yourself? And so one main thing to keep in mind is that when you're homeschooling your children, it's not always about just taking what you know and just transplanting it into your child's mind. That homeschooling is really learning alongside your child in a lot of cases. So don't feel intimidated because you don't know a lot yourself. Just learn with your children. Don't be afraid to go through the learning experience together. Number one, a very basic thing that you can do as a Black parent or a Black family or someone who has Black children is to just fill your home with Black things. Just live out your life unapologetically as a Black person and take pride in things that are Black. Like in our household, some simple things was just us wearing our hair naturally, in which, I will wear my hair straight if I want to wear it straight, but I'm just saying just taking pride in our natural hair and not making our hair to be like something odd or strange or taboo the way that it often is viewed in mainstream media. So we are very proud of our hair. We celebrate the way that our hair is. We always talk about how poofy our hair is. We talk about the different textures of our curly, poofy, kinky hair. And so those conversations like that just really make a safe environment for us being Black. So since your children are already going to be pretty much immersed in a Eurocentric environment everywhere they go outside your home, make your home a safe haven of just like all things Black. And so Janet Evans really recommended to me to really make sure that our children are watching movies and shows that do feature Black people in a positive light, because oftentimes we're not shown in a positive light in mainstream television. So work really hard to find a lot of things for your children to view, where the Black person is the main character, or that the cast is mostly Black or something like that, where your children get a positive image of Black people. Make sure the music that they listen to, the books they read, everything is really like a lot of Blackness. Those are really easy ways to really just make your child understand that being Black is normal, being Black is good, all of those things, which are not necessarily messages that children often get in a Eurocentric environment where, Black people aren't really featured much, period. And then whenever they do, they're just kind of like on the sidelines, like not really being important, not in the forefront. You can look up statistics on even books that are written for children, the statistics that show, the percentage of characters in children's books who are white, and then the percentage of like children's characters in books being animals, and then the numbers for children's book characters being Black. Like there's more books about bears and duckies or whatever than there are protagonists who are Black for children. So, it is a little bit frustrating to try to, implant positive images of your people and your children when even the stories that they read oftentimes, the best, the greatest, the most awesome characters don't look like your children, So anyway, those are really awesome ways. Just make everything Black. And like in our home, we do watch other shows. We do watch other movies that feature characters and people who are different colors. But I do make sure I make it a point to point out or show them specific things of people who look like them so that they can grow up with a sense of pride in who they are as people. In our homeschool classroom, I also make sure that I have an enormous poster, which is a map of Africa, so that they are always just identifying with where we have come from. And that always just sparks up conversations where they just walk up to the map and they're asking what this country is, where that country is. We just look up like African dances online on YouTube and try to learn some African dances. We are terrible at them. We wish we were better, but at least we get to be part of that experience to know a little bit more about our roots and finding things like that beautiful and not strange or unusual. And books. Even though I mentioned it a little bit before, but books are extremely important where your children do get to see protagonists who look like them. And especially for those of you who might be curious, how do I, teach my children Black history when I know so little bit about it myself? That's a very easy way, instead of trying to hunt down a curriculum, because, honey, like Black curricula is very slim pickings. Like Black history curricula is very slim pickings. There are some and that are really awesome out there, but there's not very many of them because, as I mentioned before, Black history isn't at the forefront as being what's important for children to learn. So there's not very much information that's being sold out there for children to learn about their history. But a really good way to do it is just buying individual books and reading those books to your children. And I've even found some books that are actually like children's readers, where after they develop and they're reading themselves, it'll be really easy for them to just jump in and read those books. So, of course, even though I mentioned before that, Martin Luther King, he's always the one who makes the cut when it comes to Black history, but we can't leave him out, obviously. So we do have, and this is actually from my classroom when I was teaching second grade, because, I tried to make sure that we did Black history the best that I could at the time with as little as I knew. I wanted to make sure that we did have some positive Black images in my second grade classroom. So this was one of my books that I had from before. And then here are some of the readers that I was telling you about, where they are, really simple, easy books for kids to read themselves, as they're developing as readers. So yeah, here's another one on Martin Luther King, and here's one about Katherine Johnson, which is actually funny because not too long ago I was, explaining to my 6-year-old the importance of her learning her math facts and how she's going to need it one day in life, and then she, ended up mentioning, like Katherine Johnson. I was like, yes, ma'am, like Katherine Johnson, be a human calculator like Katherine Johnson. So, and then Ruby Bridges, of course, this was actually written by Ruby Bridges herself too. So, different readers like that. Harriet Tubman that I mentioned before is another easy reader. Jemison, that's another one. And this particular book I like too, because not only did it talk about her going into space, but it also mentioned all the many other things that she did, different occupations that she held over her life, and it just opened up my girls' minds to that they didn't have to decide on just growing up to be one thing, that they can be many things over the course of their life. You don't have to commit to just, I want to do this one thing my whole life. Like, no, be a baker, be a writer, be a singer, be a whatever you want to be. You can be whatever you want to be. That gives your children a more positive view of themselves and their people, and not feeling so unusual or strange because what seems normal or what they see all the time is something that doesn't look like themselves. So surround them with images of people who look like them, just doing normal, everyday, positive, happy things, and then those will end up being the things that they end up, seeing in themselves, that they're capable of doing any of these wonderful things like the people who have come before them. So I hope that you enjoyed this video. I hope that it helped you to, get started on your journey with an Afrocentric homeschool experience. Or like I said, if you find yourself not necessarily being a Black person or having a Black child that you're homeschooling, maybe that would inspire you to at least incorporate some more multicultural things into your homeschooling experience so that your children will be adjusted to seeing people who are different than them. And they'll be able to understand people who are different than them a little bit more, just incorporating a little bit more color into your homeschool experience so that this next generation could hopefully grow up to love each other and respect each other and treat each other better than the generations that came before. So anyway, if you enjoyed this video, I hope that you like, share, and subscribe. But most of all, love yourselves. Bye, loves.